Previously on Higurashi When They Cry console arcs.
里子には鉄平という叔父がいます。そして鉄平は今沖宮でリナという女性と暮らしています。
Rika-chan continued her explanation in a dispassionate tone, but a slight frown on her face suggested that she didn't like this Teppei guy.
今、戸籍上では鉄平が里子の養育権を持っています。と言っても、去年まで一緒に暮らしていた時は、里子はひどい扱いを受けていましたが。
ひどい扱い？どんな？
When I asked that, Rika-chan bitterly continued her explanation. The content of the story put me at a loss for words, and my fists were trembling.
わかった。それで？
鉄平は今沖宮で暮らしていますが、おそらく近いうちにHinamizawaに戻ってきます。それは彼の生活費を稼いでいる同居人、Mamiya Rinaという女が殺されるからです。
殺される？
I jumped as soon as I heard her say that word.
殺されるって、いくら予言でも穏やかじゃないぞ。それに、なんでそのリナってやつが殺されることになるんだ？
リナは今、園崎系列の店で働いています。そして、今日から数日後、系列店で集められた上納金を狙って、強盗を働くのですが、そこは、暴力団の詰め所なのです。結果、彼らは失敗。そしてリナは逃げ遅れて、組員の手で確保され、殺されるのです。死んでもらうのです。
Her words were so cruel and brutal I didn't sound like Rika-chan. I was surprised at how easily she could say that, with such an emotionless expression. Then...
けど、リカちゃん？もしリナが殺されたら、鉄平がHinamizawaに帰ってくるんだろ？そうなったら、里子が叔父に連れ去られるって、今リカちゃんが言ったじゃないか。
言いましたのです。里子は、鉄平に連れ去られてしまうのです。おそらく、確実に。
だったら、リナがいなくなって鉄平がHinamizawaに帰ってこないよう、予防策を張った方が、里子のためじゃないか。それとも、里子を鉄平に連れ去られないような秘策でもあるってのか？
秘策は特にありませんです。それに、鉄平は戸籍上里子の扶養者ですから、鉄平が行ってきたら、里子は鉄平の元に返さなくてはいけないのです。ケイイチ、盗みを防ぐと言っても、リナを殺させず、しかも成功して沖宮から出ていかないようにするためには、そうなると、警察や園崎組の関係者にも相談できません。どうやって防ぐつもりですか？
In response to my inquiry, Keiichi laughed and folded his arms, then grinned. How detestable. If he gives his usual I'll keep thinking about answer, I'll smack him with this bottle.
リカちゃん、忘れたか？里子のためだったら、力を確実に貸してくれる奴が、部活メンバーにいるじゃないか。
When I realized who he was referring to, I lightly sighed. I've already made my assumptions about how that scenario would play out. I had no idea what he was talking about. Keiichi, what on earth are you thinking? But...
任せてくれないか、リカちゃん。俺にいい考えがあるんだ。
Keiichi let out a fearless laugh after saying that. When I looked at his face, the guilt I felt about abandoning Sadako and the disgust I felt over my own helplessness seemed so foolish, so strange.
な、リカちゃん。
Against my better judgment, I nodded to him. Well, I guess it's fine. This boy proclaimed that fate was as flimsy as a thin sheet of paper. What kind of miracle did he have in store? That I wanted to see.
それって
A terrible thought flashed through me in an instant, and my spine froze over. It was like an awful nightmare. Maybe I experienced that in another world? And, as if to confirm that, Rika-chan looked up at me and nodded.
リナさえいなければ、鉄平さえいなければ、そう考えた先に行き着く結論は、今圭一が思いついたものと同じなのです。そして不幸を回避するために選んだはずの手段がさらに別の不幸につながってしまう。
リカちゃん、
そんな世界があったのです。
なるほど。確かに気になる話ではあります。
Kasai-san quietly listened to Rika-chan's polite explanation, but once her story was over, he simply said that with a nod and zipped his lips.
で、私たちにどうしろと？
そのリナって女が園崎の上納金を狙えないようにしてくれ。リナが働いているのは園崎系列の店だから、園崎の力をもってすればリナの動きを封じるくらい簡単だろ。
まあそりゃあ、
もしそれが無理でも園崎家のシオンには一度話しておいた方がいいかなって。無関係とは言い難いしさ。
それを言うならなんでお姉に言わないんです？順序おかしくありませんか？
いや、こういうのってシオンの方が詳しそうだからな。
え？詳しいってどうしてです？
シオンって園崎の系列の店でいろいろバイトしてるって言ってただろ。だからそういう店の実情とか上納金の話とかは逆に詳しいんじゃないかなって。
A few days later, Rina, Mamiya, and Teppei Hojo's corpses were discovered in the village. As Rika-chan and I stared at the scene in awe, someone walked up to us. It was Shion. No, she's alive. Killing the two of them was the quickest solution, right? The grin on Shion's face said as much, and her eyes were shining in an eerie dark red hue. However, things didn't play out as Shion expected, and so it continues. Greetings, my name is Neosekken, welcome back to my Let's Play of the Higurashi When They Cry console arcs. So, we've got two bad endings for Amote out of the way, and I feel kind of conflicted about them, to be honest. Because on one hand, they're very quick and relatively painless affairs. I deviate to one, and they seem to resolve themselves in a matter of minutes, and then boom, we can continue right on from the main story from where we left off. But on the other hand, they also feel pretty damn lazy to me compared to some of the stuff that we've seen in something like Yoigoshi, for example. So much so to where they feel very pointless, these bad ends. Like they just I think they could have put in a little bit more effort to have made these bad endings and these bad endings I've seen so far a bit more interesting. But I don't know. It's not the worst thing. It's not the worst thing I've seen in these console arcs, all things considered. But it's just, I'm just sitting here scratching my head here, looking at these bad ends so far, and I'm just still thinking to myself, what were they thinking with these? You know? But anyway, we got some proper choices to get to here. Gotta be a bit more careful with how we choose our words with Shion. Because if we don't, our lives will literally be in danger for some fucking reason. So, do you know of the story about Darth Rena the Wise?
え？何ですかいきなり。
Shion's eyes opened a little wide and she tilted her head to the side. Seeing that, Rika-chan sat down her spoon and continued from there.
園崎系列のお店で働く間宮里奈という人のお話なのです。
園崎系列の店でリナ？知らないなぁ。葛西は？
Kasai thought it over for a moment. After seemingly getting lost on how to respond, he eventually answered.
おそらく知っている人物かと。間宮里奈が何か。
Kasai-san spoke in a clerical tone. I couldn't read his expression thanks to his sunglasses, but judging by his voice, it seemed like he was feeling suspicious after suddenly hearing Rina's name. Will the two of them be able to take this story seriously? Or more importantly, will they even believe a story based on a wild prediction or premonition? I suddenly started feeling anxious in front of this man called Kasai-san. But this is no time to hesitate. They have to believe me. I took a short breath, then spoke all at once.
系列の店って園崎に上納金を毎月支払ってますよね。
ケイちゃん？
リナがその上納金に手をつけようと計画しています。
は？
Shion and Kasai-san looked at one another in bewilderment. A perfectly natural reaction. There's no way they could have expected a story like this to come out of my mouth.
ちょっと待ってください。なんでそんな話、ケイちゃんとリカちゃまから。
それは。
それに、上納金に手をつけるって穏やかじゃないですよ。だいたい、そのリナって女は何者ですか？
Shion's last question was directed at Kasai-san. He adjusted his glasses while offering her an answer.
間宮里奈。店で名乗っている名前ですが、本名かどうかは。フラワーロードの店の一つで働いている従業員です。
従業員？ああ。でも、ますますわかんないですよ。どうしてうちの従業員のことをケイちゃんたちが知ってるんです？
あ、いや、だから。
That's because we've paid for her services at one point. Joking, of course. Shion's shrewd eyes darted back and forth between Rika-chan and I. Meanwhile, Kasai-san was carefully staring straight at me. He seemed to be verifying the authenticity and intent behind my words.
僕が聞いたのです。
Sensing my difficulty in answering, Rika-chan spoke up in a calm voice while still eating her slowly melting parfait.
え？リカちゃまが？どこで？
図書館なのです。なんだか変な人たちとワイワイ楽しそうに話していたのですよ。
図書館？うちの従業員が？似合わない。
とっても場違いだったのです。だからよく目立っていたのです。
詳しく聞きましょうか。
So, for the first time, Kasai-san leaned slightly forward and carefully listened to what Rika-chan and I had to say. Upon seeing that, Shion started looking a little more serious and turned toward us.
なるほど。確かに気になる話ではあります。
Kasai-san quietly listened to Rika-chan's polite explanation, but once her story was over, he simply said that with a nod, then zipped his lips.
で、私たちにどうしろと？
そのリナって女が園崎の上納金を狙えないようにしてくれ。リナが働いているのは園崎系列の店だから、園崎の力をもってすればリナの動きを封じるくらい簡単だろ。
まあそりゃあ。
もしそれが無理でも園崎家のシオンには一度話しておいた方がいいかなって。無関係とは言い難いしさ。
それを言うならなんでお姉に言わないんです？順序おかしくありませんか？
いや、こういうのってシオンの方が詳しそうだからな。
詳しいってどうしてです？
シオンって園崎の系列の店でいろいろバイトしてるって言ってただろ。だからそういう店の実情とか上納金の話とかは逆に詳しいんじゃないかなって。
I answered completely reflexively, but I was still convinced that reasoning would be considered acceptable. Mion certainly is the effective head of the Sonozaki family, but given the distance to Okinomiya, it seemed like Shion would be more familiar with this sort of topic. What's more, there's a high possibility that threatening movements like these, without any proper confirmation, would never even reach Mion.
それにシオンならもしかしたらその店で働いてるかもしれないし。
その店ってフラワーロードの？私が？って働いてるわけないでしょ。
I nodded over and over to her. I was about to say it was just a joke. But then for some reason, Rika-chan joined in.
働いたことはないのですか？
ない。ケイちゃん、リカちゃま、喧嘩売ってますか？そんなお店で未成年の私が働いたら一発レッドカードですよ。
And yet a minor working at a place like Angel Mort is A-okay. People can look, but they can't touch if you're a minor.
Fascinating.
まったく。
働きたいと一度頼まれたことはありますがね。時給がいいからと。
シャラップ。
So she did consider working there. I thought so. Scandalous.
で、
Shion cleared her throat and settled down, then stared straight at me as she said that.
私のバイトの話はともかく、ケイちゃんたちの目的とかメリットは？
目的？メリット？
リナにうちの上納金をくすねさせなければ、ケイちゃんたちにはメリットがあるんでしょ？それは何ですか？ぜひとも聞きたいものですね。
それは。
だいたい、どうしてケイちゃんたちがそんな話を知っているのか。ケイちゃんたちは、リナって女とどう関係してるのか。その女の動きを封じる目的は何なのか。
Why am I smelling pizza right now? It's weird.
ことが大きいだけに、それがはっきりしないと、悪いですけど、言う通りには従えませんよ。
I got stuck thinking of how to respond to that. Shion is quick-witted, so of course she wouldn't believe right away. I myself only half believe it, so there's not much that can be done about it. Can you tell me about that one time when Rena got herself thrown into a pig pen and the pig pen ate all the hair on her scalp? Kasai. I turned the argument around and asked Kasai-san about it.
最近そのリナって女性の身辺におかしなところはありませんか？
おかしなとは？
例えば大して出勤もしていないのに金遣いが最近とっても荒くなっているとか、見慣れない連中と付き合い始めているようだとか。
Kasai-san stopped to think deeply for a while, organizing his thoughts. Then he slowly turned toward Shion and waited for her to nod before opening his mouth.
そういう話ならば。
葛西、心当たりでもあるんですか？
はい。
Just as I thought. Feeling reassured by his answer, I leaned forward to hear more.
リナは最近金の貸し借りで同僚とトラブルがあったとかで、店にはあまり顔を出さなくなりました。同僚だけではなく、あちこちで相当借金を作っていたようで、リナの名前を聞いていい顔をする人間はほとんどいません。
でもそれだけじゃ。
ええ、まあ。ですが、クラブの若い衆の何人かと妙につるんだりして、金もないだろうに変だと思っていたところなんです。
借金があるのに羽振りがいいってわけね。
あともう一つ、図書館で見かけたという話ですが、実は私も聞いておりました。意外だとは思ってましたが、そう聞けば、そうか。なるほど。
Kasai-san nodded as if he had quickly reached a conclusion. When Shion saw that, she spoke up.
ちょっと葛西、リカちゃまとケイちゃんの言うこと真に受けてるんですか？
もしもということがあります。それに上納金においそれと手をつけられては、組としてのメンツもある。
あ、すみません、葛西さん。
I couldn't help but interrupt as soon as I heard the word dishonorable.
できればリナには何もしないでもらいたいんです。
何も？それはどういう意味ですか？
Kasai-san's eyes suddenly lit up. I felt intimidated and caught my breath, but I absolutely had to say this.
殺さないでほしい。そういう意味です。
え？あのね、ケイちゃん。言ってる意味、全然わかんなくなってきてるんですけど。
Shion's dubious frown was on full display as she glared at me to vent her displeasure. That made sense. Not only am I an outsider interfering with the inner workings of a gang, but I'm asking them to spare the life of a stranger who isn't even worth saving. They can't help but be baffled. But before I could do anything, Kasai-san gently, I don't know where I got greatly from, gently adjusted his glasses and made a cold assertion.
あいにくですが、それはお断りします。そんな三下どもに舐められては、ヤクザ者のメンツが立たない。それなりの報いを受けるのが、この世界の掟というものです。
And that price, unfortunately for her, is going to be a lot more than just a pinky finger or two. He responded as expected. After all, there are times to be firm. But even so, speaking directly to the concerned parties does make this easier, because it allows me to accurately convey my intentions.
それは分かっています。でもお願いします。奴らを許すとかじゃなく、このこと自体をなかったことにしてほしいんです。
なかったこと？それは無理というものです。そもそも。
つまり、リナたちが盗みの実行を最初から諦めれば、金も取られず、メンツも失われない。そうですよね。
まあ、それは。
で、話の腰を折って申し訳。そこで私たちの当然の疑問ってわけです。どうしてケイちゃんたちはそのリナなんて悪徳人を助けてやろうって考えたんですか？
I became invested after talking with Rika-chan. She convinced me to buy this house down Sevenworth Street. It was a really nice place. It had a jacuzzi bathtub in it, and I even found a gold tooth underneath the fridge.
リカちゃんに相談を受けてさ、なんとか穏便に事を済ませる方法がないかなって。
そうなのです。あまり大ごとにするのは良くないと思ったのですよ。
Rika-chan quietly cut in to back up my story. However, Shion was stubbornly staring at us with her head tilted, still trying to gauge our true intention. Her head is always tilted. What are you talking about, Keiichi?
正直、そこまで赤の他人をかばい立てする意図が全くわかりません。心証出罰は仁義の上では当然のルールですよ。
Well, unfortunately, half the time things don't quite work out that way. In that case, I have no choice. I was prepared for her to be this suspicious, so I'll have to tell her the truth. The truth is, Shion, I am in love with Rina.
そのリナってのは、聡子にひどいことをしていたおじ。
after all the trouble we go through to avoid mentioning this particular detail, we arrive here right at this point where we're mentioning her connection to Teppei, and by extension Sadako. And from what I was able to tell last time, bringing this information up right away was basically what ended up getting us to that bad end to begin with. So, I mean, right now I'm confused. How exactly is the so-called correct approach that I've been taking so far supposed to actually keep me from getting my ass served back to me on a silver platter here? I'm legitimately confused right now.
鉄平と深い関係にある。
はい？それ、どういうことです？
I stammered for a moment, thinking about how best to explain it. I didn't know much about it myself, so would she take it in a weird way if I didn't explain it well enough?
リナはその鉄平とつるんでいるのです。
Kasai-san chimed in to address Shion's confusion.
北条鉄平が札付きのゴロ付きなのはご存知だと思います。そしてこの沖宮で生活を営んでいます。
それで
リナはどうやら鉄平と組んで結婚詐欺を生業にしているようでして。
In short, the woman finds an easy mark to get romantically involved with. Then once they get in good together with the man rolls up saying, "Get your hands off my woman," and starts demanding financial compensation.
近頃ではリナと組んでの詐欺行為が北条鉄平の唯一の収入源のようですね。
要は北条鉄平がリナに生活を依存してるってことか。
Shion nodded and made a face that seemed to show she understood.
もしそのリナが金を持ってとんずらしたらどうなる？
ん？
リナが上納金を持って沖宮の町から、いや落とし前つけられて消されても収入源を失った鉄平は即路頭に迷う。家賃だってすぐに払えなくなるし生活にも困る。
まあそうでしょうね。
そうしたら北条鉄平はHinamizawaの家に戻るしかない。そうなったら聡子はその鉄平に連れ戻される。その結果どういうことが想像できる？
Again, we're just telling her everything that we were apparently not supposed to tell her that put us on bad end number 2 to begin with. Why are we doing this? How was the incorrect approach functionally any different from the correct approach here? Shion's complexion changed the moment she heard that. Rika-chan and Shion should both know better than me how Sadako was treated by her uncle. Sadako had finally regained her vitality after living together with Rika-chan. So if she were to start living for uncle again and end up back in the same situation as last year, it was easy to imagine how it would turn out.
ケイちゃん考えすぎ。それどこのテレビドラマの話ですか？
After a brief silence, Shion let out a dry laugh, like it was just a joke. But I could see the deep bloodlust in her eyes. The man who tormented Sadako and drove her into a corner is still out there. She overlooked him after he fled to Okinomiya, but she never forgave him. And he's still out there selfishly doing as he pleases. Of course it's unforgivable. And so, if this Rina lady is with Teppei, then... Indeed, I understood perfectly well the dark emotions swirling around in Shion's mind. So...
シオン、それはやめてくれ。
え？
どうしようもないクズだ。殺されても喜ぶ奴はいても悲しむ奴はいないだろう。でも俺たちがそんな最低野郎と関わる必要はない。
Wait, so this is where it deviates.
そんな奴のためにお前のその手を聡子やお前のためにも汚してもらいたくないんだ。
変な言いがかりですね。私がどうしてそんな風に考えたと？
Because we saw you do just that in the last episode, and for some reason you killed us too! To boot! Bitch.
俺も考えたからさ。ついさっきな。
Shion's eyes opened wide, and then she fell silent.
たとえ誰かのためって言葉を付け加えても、犯罪はどこまで行っても犯罪にしかならないと思う。だから、俺たちは正しいやり方で聡子を幸せにしてやろうぜ。その方が聡子も喜んでくれるんじゃないかな。
もう、ですか。
え？
なんでもないです。
Shion shook her head and shrugged her shoulders with a bitter smile on her face. Then, she took a drink of her completely melted ice water to calm herself down.
それはそうと、どうやってなかったことにするつもりですか？まさかあいつらを説得するとでも？
いや、簡単だ。シオン、それと葛西さん、頼みがあります。
You're gonna get the money out of there before she has a chance to get it herself. Is that what you're gonna do?
何でしょうか。
園崎組の事務所の鍵、全部取っ替えてください。
Oh, that works.
今日中に。
Shion, Kasai, and even Rika-chan beside me all stared at me stunned. At any rate, that reaction alone made it all worth it.
ちょっと待ってくださいよ。そんなのいきなり言われたって、業者さんの手配だけでも数日はかかりますよ。
ああ、だから鍵を変えるっていうよりも、ドアごと変えてくれ。例えば、隣のホームが似た部屋とか、ドアの付け替えなら、日曜大工の延長で可能だろ？
いやー、まあそりゃ数十分もあれば。
理由は、例えば、立て付けが悪いから隣と入れ替えて様子を見るってことで。あ、これはもちろん、リナたちには秘密だぜ。
ですが、失礼ですが前原さん。連中はおそらくキーチェーンごと盗み出した可能性があります。一つがダメだったら、他の鍵を試してみるのでは？
That's a good point.
葛西さん、知ってますか？コピーしたての鍵って、ものすごく回しにくいんですよね。
まあ、確かに。
つまりこうです。連中は鍵が合わなければ、ひたすら焦る。そして、間違いじゃないかと思って、他の鍵を試してみても、コピーした鍵は引っかかりやすいし、極度の緊張状態だから、手が震えて、違うと勝手に思い込む。
This does not seem like a solid idea at all, because you're just relying on them not having the mental fortitude to actually make sure that the key properly turns, even if it's newly copied. I mean, there's a chance that they could just do that too. I mean, they'll try. I don't know. This seems like a really stupid idea to me personally.
そして試行錯誤してるうちに勝手に解釈する。この鍵全部が違うところの鍵なんじゃないかって。
嘘。
Suddenly, past memories revived in the back of Shion's mind. Come to think of it, she tasted the exact same feeling when she escaped from Lucia last year. Her mind went completely blank when she struggled to return the keys.
そして連中は責任の押し付け合いを始める。で、その日は結局、出直しってことで退散。その上で業者を呼んで鍵を取り替えれば全て解決。どうでしょうか？あれ？
The three of them all stared at me in silence. Could it be there's some serious flaw in my plan? Well, yes, there is. I more or less pointed it out. But surprisingly enough... Uh-oh. She's laughing. This could be bad. The silence was broken by Rika-chan's laughter, coming from right beside me.
ケイちゃん、それナイスです。なんかドアを前に孫ついて言い争いしてる連中の顔想像したらめっちゃ笑えますよ。ねえ、カサイ。
はあ。いや、笑い事ではないんですがね。
Even Shion was holding her sides and roaring with laughter. And it was hard to gauge Kasai-san from behind his sunglasses. But he seemed puzzled. I never imagined they'd laugh at my idea. Well, it's a dumb idea, and dumb ideas tend to evoke laughter.
カサイ、
Or rage.
ここは言う通りにしてみましょう。
え？いや、しかし。
Shion wiped the tears from her eyes as she proposed that to him. But Kasai-san, on the other hand, had a sober expression like he was deep in thought. Well, that made sense. As far as Kasai-san was concerned, simply planning this robbery was a dishonorable act of betrayal. It can't be easy for him to accept simply overlooking it.
もう、固いこと言わずに。なんだか面白そうじゃないですか。責任は私が持ちますから。ね。
責任と言われても、シオンさんにどんな。はあ、わかりました。シオンさんがそういうのでしたら。
Kasai-san let out a sigh and voiced his agreement. I bet Shion is always pushing him around like this. Still, I have to thank him for being willing to follow along with her.
ケイちゃんのいたずら、ほんと最高ですよ。実際に近くまで見に行きたいくらいです。
言ってもいいけど捕まえるなよ。それじゃあ話がぶち壊しだ。
Shion responded with an understood while raising one hand like she was reciting an oath. Kasai-san also looked different from before as he picked up the banana from his melting parfait and took a bite.
ありがとうございます。よろしくお願いしますのです。
Rika-chan deeply bowed to Shion and Kasai. I rushed to do the same. We picked at the rest of our parfaits. The ice cream was almost completely melted, but the strawberries and bananas were still plenty fresh. I stirred my long spoon around to find the treasure hidden underneath the melted ice cream. Shion had already finished eating hers and ordered another. Rika-chan was enjoying eating at her own pace, carefully spooning the melted ice cream into her mouth. Since then, no one said another word about Rina. We had a lively, innocent conversation about topics like a new shop that opened at Okinomiya train station, or a new album being released by a favorite singer. Kasai-san sipped at his coffee while watching over us. Eventually, Kasai-san covered the bill, and we all left the restaurant.
シオン、カサイさん、今日はありがとう。
I bowed to the two of them once more. In the end, I was very grateful that Kasai-san came here today.
もしものことがあれば、こちらにも不利益が出る話ですので。
ありがとうなのです。二人とも。
Rika-chan bowed down as well, and then smiled.
それじゃあ、俺たちはこれで。
あ、ケイちゃん。
Just then, Shion stopped me right as I was about to turn my back.
ケイちゃん、ついでだから教えておきます。その、鉄平ってやつのこと。
Why am I getting an uncomfortable feeling from this?
さっき、帰り際にマスターから聞いたんですが、鉄平とその相方のリナ、最近また大口のカモを見つけたって言っていました。
それがどうかしたのか？
It's Reina's father, isn't it?
その相手の名字が竜宮だそうです。
Before I could even react, Rika-chan gasped in astonishment. Ryuugu. Could it be that Rina was targeting Reina's father with her marriage fraud scheme?
ここであれが来るなんて、神様はやっぱり性悪なのでしょうか。
Rika-chan clenched her fists. Nightfall was fast approaching. Well, this certainly complicates matters, doesn't it? New tips unlocked. Moving blunder. Well, looks like we're gonna have to be doubly careful how we handle Rina because, well, this could potentially end up, leading, because depending on what we do, this in turn could end up potentially leading to Rena going off the rails. Not good.
あれ？ここにあった荷物、誰か知らないか？
そこにあった大型家具ですか？それでしたら、今さっき東島さんがトラックに積み込んで配送に出ちゃいましたよ。
ここにあったのって、明日配送の指定が入っていただろ？今日持って行ったら相手先に怒られるぞ。
そうなんですか？でも、もう2時間も前に出ちゃいましたし。
まったく。なんでこんな初歩的ミスをしたんだ？東島君はうちじゃかなりのベテランのはずだろう。
ああ、それですけど、何でも先方から電話があって、今日にしてほしいって言ってきたそうですよ。東島さん、勝手な客だってプリプリして運び込んでいましたから。
そうなのか？でも、その日はどうしても不在でダメだから避けてくれって、何度も念押しされたって百貨店の担当が言ってたんだぞ。
事情はわかりませんけどね。お客さんは神様って言っても、こっちにも都合があるんですから、もう少し配慮してほしいもんですよ。
まったくだ。それで、その困った配送先の客の名前は？
これですね。名字は竜宮さんですね。住所は
What was that? Was that Hanyu I just heard laughing? And furniture too. Like, what? What is going on with this, I wonder? She wasn't a bad girl. She very seriously and bravely fought against fate. Because she wanted to protect what she held dear. Because she didn't want to lose it. That was her amazing strength, her dignified kindness, and her love. But she realized she thought too hard about wanting to love someone. She forgot how to be loved and ended up alone.
リカちゃんにもできる努力があったのにしなかった。
Rena's words from back then suddenly came back to me. It was a shock like being splashed with cold water. In that moment, I couldn't say anything back, like I was completely frozen. Her words denounced my failure to make an effort last year. And now, I can only look back on the scars of those past memories. The regret, disappointment, and guilt couldn't be put into words. Even now, they blame me, and I feel deep pain every time I see Sadako remembering Satoshi. At that time, the power to break my destiny. No, if only I had the thoughts and will to do it. Then the tragedy Rena caused would never have begun at all.
それ本当か？
Rena experienced that tragedy in a previous world. The sorrowful world that drove Rena to protect her home. Her father was being deceived in a marriage scam designed to rob him, so Rena murdered Rina Mamiya and her accomplice Teppei Hojo with her own hands. But the story didn't end there. Her guilt and regret fostered paranoia, making her distrust her friends, eventually leading to tragedy.
"確かにありえない話じゃないな。そんな奴らに家族をめちゃくちゃにされたら、俺だってそう考えるかもしれない。それにやっぱり罪を償わずに隠したんじゃ、不安と疑心暗鬼でおかしくなっちまうかもな。
信じてくれるのですか？
まあ運命ってよりその可能性をな。リカちゃんの予言するその未来ってのは、もしかしたら現実になるかもしれないことだ。だから当然だろ。
When we talked on the way back from the coffee shop, Keiichi believed in me yet again. He's amazingly straightforward, and he's a good person. But that kind of receptiveness was like a piece of cotton, gently soaking in the water around it. More than anything else, I was deeply thankful.
じゃあレナにそのことを注意しておかないとな。とリカちゃん、
何ですか？
まさかまたこのまま見過ごした方がいいなんて考えてないよな。
僕はそんな意地悪さんではないのです。
I puffed my cheeks and glared at Keiichi. I realized it was just a joke, but I was still a little upset. I wanted to resolve the consistent problems like Shion as soon as possible.
とりあえず事実は伝えた方がいいのです。でも
I suddenly spoke up about what was nagging at my heart.
もしレナが家族のことを大切に思っているなら、ちゃんと僕たちの言うことを冷静に聞いてくれますでしょうか？
え？それどういう意味だ？
正直レナはリナのことを嫌っていると思います。でも前にエンジェルモートで見かけた時は、それを押し隠して父親の気持ちを守ろうとしていました。そんなレナがリナが父親を実は騙していたと知ったらどう考えるでしょうか。
I grew more and more anxious while making my own predictions. Rena is normally bright, cheerful, and friendly. But when she gets angry, her emotions erupt like a raging inferno, and she loses all self-control. And her ability to take action is on the same level as Keiichi, but to be completely blunt, she has a tendency to run wild. Rena looks upset by that remark. Rena certainly has been blaming herself, thinking her own problems caused her parents' divorce. Her home was broken because she didn't put in enough effort to protect it. Right, I believe she said that in a previous world. So, if Rena learns that her father is being swindled by a terrible woman, she'll probably use any available means to wipe it away and protect him. In other words, we ourselves could be pushing Rena to cause a tragedy. Yeah, that's exactly what I was fearful of
火に
earlier.
油を注ぐという言葉もあります。もしこのことを教えたら、レナは敵意をそのまま殺意に変えてしまうのではないでしょうか。
だからちゃんと話し合えばいいんじゃないか。 それに相手を殺しても何の解決にもならないし、それどころか不幸になるってことくらいレナにだってわかるさ。
ケイイチは楽観的に考えすぎなのです。
リカちゃんが悲観的なのかもしれないぞ。
Without even knowing my concerns. How naive.
それに
Sensing my misgivings, Keiichi suddenly stopped smiling at me and spoke up.
レナってさ、確かに一度思い込んだら意外に頑固なところがあるっていうより、自分自身でそう思い込んでいるところがあるよな。
思い込んでですか？
Well, I mean, you're the one who's been alive, well, technically alive, more or less. I mean, you've existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years at this point, Rika. I mean, shouldn't you know that Rena can certainly get obsessed with things from time to time? I mean, look at her hoarding habits, for crying out loud.
ああ、レナは自宅のコレクションとか、作ってきた弁当のこととか、カワイイモードとか、自分のキャラを積極的に出してくるだろ。だけど時々それが行き過ぎて、その理想像から外れると全てダメ。他の人には受け入れてもらえないなんて、実際は勝手な思い込みなんだけど、そこまで自分をアイドルみたいに作らなくてもいいのにな。
そうなのですか？
I'm surprised that he has to actually explain all this to you, Rika. I mean, seriously, shouldn't you know this about her? So Keiichi realized even that. I hadn't noticed at all. Yeah! Which is why I'm confused. Like an idol. Huh. When you put it like that, I can agree. We all hide our nasty sides. But aside from that, there's no inferiority complex. Because that's perfectly natural. But for some reason, Rena was always so dependable. Trying her hardest to be a good girl. And that led to the past tragedy, running off without talking to anyone.
だから俺がレナってなんか元気がないなって感じるのは、逆に色々と振る舞ってみせる時だ。特に最近ミートボール弁当を異常なくらいにたくさん作っていただろ。俺はなんとなくだけど、あれって寂しい気持ちを外とのつながりで中和しているように見えてさ、逆に家で何かあったのかなって感じた。
なんだか難しいのです。
昔さ、東京の時にいたんだよ、そういうやつ。突然約束とか前触れもなしに漫画とかおもちゃを持ってきて、仲良し同士で盛り上がるんだけど、なんだか必死な感じだった。後で聞いたら、そいつそういう時の前日に決まって親と喧嘩したりトラブルがあったりしたって聞いたな。
When you're feeling insecure, it makes you want to confirm your own sense of existence.
そういうものでしょうか。
サトコもきっとそれを感じたんじゃないかな。でなきゃ泊まりに行くなんていきなり言い出さないと思う。実際俺たちみんな気にしてたからさ。
I hung my head, feeling embarrassed. It's inexcusable, but I had no idea. I just thought Sako's sleepover was a spur-of-the-moment thing. Everyone is putting a lot of thought into these things, genuinely thinking about their friends and doing their best to be strong for them. I've had thousands of encounters with them up until now, but have I ever really tried to think about or understand my friends to this extent? Apparently not.
すごいのです。ケイイチもサトコも見習わないといけないのです。
まあそんなに口で言うほど大したことはしてないけどな。だけどどんな時でもその時の全力で力になる。それが仲間ってもんだろ。
Keiichi smiled at me as he said that. Regrettably, the Keiichi of this world was far more mature than I. Which is Hilarious and depressing all at once when once again you remember the fact that you, Rika, are the one that's technically hundreds if not thousands of years older than he is.
さて、このことをどうやって伝えるのがレナにとって一番かだよな。
Thinking about it now, I guess we could take this as an indirect admission that Rika is a woman child. In more ways than one, technically speaking.
そうだな。
信頼して自分から話に来てもらうのを待つという手もあるのです。
Keiichi looked troubled, so I gently made a suggestion. In fact, even in the previous worlds, problems were solved just by Rena having a talk with Mion. As long as Rena still deeply trusts her friends, our current concerns are nothing but needless anxiety. But there's still a possibility that I'll have the opposite effect.
まあ確かに。それも一つの手だよな。
レナは僕たちの仲間なのです。仲間だったらレナのことをもっと信頼してあげてもいいと思うのですよ。
However, Keiichi shook his head in disagreement.
相談するのってさ、されるよりする方がずっと気が重いもんだ。だからそのせいでレナが遠慮して勝手に判断して暴走して取り返しがつかなくなる可能性だってあるんじゃないか。
When Keiichi pointed that out, I was suddenly taken aback. That was just like last year with Satoshi. Back then, we were all thinking of waiting until Satoshi came to talk to us, which means we effectively did nothing. And what was the result? Satoshi ran off on his own, was suspected of killing his aunt, and ultimately he disappeared. In many ways, it was a worst-case scenario. I don't like saying if or maybe, but even if it would have been meddlesome, if we had just tried talking to Satoshi about our concerns, maybe he wouldn't have disappeared. No, that's not all. Even in the previous worlds, it was the same with Rena. Back then, Rena told us.
本当に不幸な人はね、必死なんだよ。
Who on earth was it that drove Rena that far? Keiichi? Mion? Sadako? Or was it me? Sure, I noticed that Rena wasn't feeling well, but I didn't know that it was motivated by family problems. By the time I realized that, it was already over, and there was no turning back. Humans are not that strong. So, even if you want someone to help you, even if you manage to find a patient and kind-hearted person willing to do it, it takes a lot of mental preparation and courage to take that first step. So, unless you actively create that opportunity, you're just closing your heart and pretending to care about the other person, right? In which case, it really is my fault. Wasn't I the one who didn't even want to talk things over with Keiichi, thinking it would be unpleasant and meddlesome?
僕はまだ努力が足りなかったのですね。
As I muttered that, I drooped my head. After being reincarnated thousands of times, the same conversations continued happening over and over, like a broken record. As a result, I stopped contributing the moment I could foresee how things would develop. I'd say this is how it is, and resign myself. I probably missed a few opportunities in there.
リカちゃん。
Keiichi plopped a hand on my head and gently stroked my hair. I could feel the soft, comfortable touch through my hair. My cheeks started turning red, just a little bit.
ケイイチ、
できることがあるならそれを全力でやろうぜ。結果は後からついてくるし、それに失敗してもまた別の方法を考えればいいさ。
Keiichi smiled as he said that. When I saw that, I finally began to smile too. Honestly, you really are such an incredibly kind-hearted person. All right, let's go find Rena, and thought I heard something for a second. Let's go find Rena and interrogate her a little bit about her family troubles. After school the next day, we use a desire to see Rena's collection as a pretense to hang out at her house later today.
あ、いいけど、突然どうしてかな、
We're trying to keep you from bloodying your hands. Rena quizzically tilted her head to the side after hearing our sudden request, but Sadako abruptly interrupted our conversation.
一人かは私の話を聞いて羨ましくなったのでございますわ。
Come to think of it, Sadako did stay at Rena's house last Sunday.
なんだか前に見た時よりもさらにグレードアップしておりましたのよ。特にあの信号機なんてどうやって手に入れたのかしら。最近ゴミ山で可愛いものがいっぱいある場所を見つけたの。週末また探しに行くからさとこちゃんもどうかな。それもいいですわね。私もレナさんに負けずにレアなお宝をゲットしてみせますわ。ダメだよ。可愛いのはレナがお持ち帰りするんだから。
The two of them were getting along well. Thanks to that, it was even easier than expected to get Rena to agree to a visit. Nice work, Sadako.
あそこは幽霊が出るから近寄らない方がいいらしいのですよ。ニパー。
縁起でもないな、それ。けど私もレナのコレクション久々に見てみたいな。一緒してもいいかな、ケイちゃん。
ミーはこの後綿流しの打ち合わせが入っているのです。だからご一緒はできないのですよ。
なんで知ってるの、リカちゃん。お社様から受信した。
電波が届いたのですよ、ニパー。
That's what you get when you carelessly broadcast your secrets on the airwaves, Mion. In reality, I confirmed the schedule with Keiichi. I originally suggested that Mion come along for today's visit to the Ryuugu household, but Keiichi sternly rejected the idea. Maybe because she can't get a good read on the situation.
まあミオはまた今度ってことで、俺も渾身の力で掘り出したランディ君元気でやってるか見に行きたいしな。
とっても元気だよ。今でも時々一緒に寝てるんだから。
I don't know whether I guess I'm kind of leaning towards pitying Randy more than anything, I suppose. Poor Randy. Is Rena seriously sleeping with a statue of a white-bearded old man at her bedside? Poor Randy. I'd rather that not be the first thing I see when I wake up.
というわけでリカちゃん、帰ったらレナの家に集合。ゴーだ。
ゴーなのですよ、ニパー。それじゃあお茶とお菓子準備して待ってるからね。
We were all getting excited. Mion, on the other hand, was pouting and feeling left out.
ブーブー。最近ケイちゃんってリカちゃんとばっかり。おじさんつまんないぞ。
浮気は男の解消ですわよ。
Now that's just slander, Sadako. I take umbrage with that remark.
本気だったら許しませんけどね。
大丈夫だってみーちゃん。最後は圭一くん、ちゃんとみーちゃんのところへ帰ってきてくれるから。
そうだよね、圭一くん。
Yeah, you'll come back to Mion after everything's all said and done. Right, Keiichi?
待て、ちょっと待て。そもそも浮気とかその前に、なんだそのデフォルト設定は。俺とミオンはそういう関係じゃないと何度言ったらわかる。しかもレナにサトコ。お前ら目がマジで怖えぞ。
Reina's eyes look terrifying. Sadako's, not so much.
こーら、ミオン。お前も真っ赤になってないで。少しは否定しろ。
So I'm Keiichi's mistress, huh? How amusing.
ねえ。やっぱり熟女よりも若い果実が一番なのですよ、みさん。
Careful, Rika. Those are some real fighting words right there.
不潔だよ、圭一くん。お仕置き。
Here we go.
はん。レナ。ちょっと待って。話をちゃんと聞く。
You know, now that I think about it, I think this is actually the first time I've ever seen Rika in this CG. So this is definitely new.
誰が熟女だ。おばさんだ。
なら自分をおじさんなんて言わなきゃいいんですよ。
Hello, Shion.
あんたもどっから湧いてきた、シオン。
もちろん今日もサトコに強化訓練を。これは新作アスパラのベーコン巻きで。
Oh boy!
アスパラはご勘弁と前に申し上げましたのに。
Asparagus isn't really all that bad in Sadako. The club members were especially fun and lively today. And so, I wanted to protect that. I don't want to lose it. As I thought that, I prayed that my feelings would be able to get through to Rena. Praying to a god that was no longer at my side. I wonder about that. Tension coursed through my entire body when we arrived in front of Rena's house. Every single step we took was moving us closer to controlling fate. I closed my eyes like I was in a prayer. Rena, no matter what, we're your friends. I'm certain we'll avoid this tragedy. Not if I've got anything to say about it.
よし。
I opened my eyes once again and nodded to Keiichi beside me. Keiichi remained silent and looked back at me with a serious expression, completely unlike the relaxed atmosphere he displayed in the classroom. Without a doubt, I absolutely want to prevent Reina's tragedy. I braced myself, then rang the bell at the front of a door of Reina's house. Things are going to be hell of awkward if it ends up being Rena who answers the door. I could hear the doorbell ringing, even from outside the house. At the same time, I could hear the pitter-patter of footsteps approaching from within. The door opened and Rena greeted us with a big smile.
圭一くん、リカちゃん、いらっしゃい。
Rena was dressed in an apron, suggesting she was doing housework in the kitchen. Judging by that, I could tell she was trying to get things ready for our arrival.
おう、上がるぞ。
お邪魔しますです。はい、上がって上がって。
Rena set out some slippers for us, then ushered us inside. Everything around felt bright, carefree, and warm. I started feeling a little guilty. It was depressing thinking about the conversation we were about to have with Rena. There's no way she's going to enjoy the topic we're planning to discuss here. Who would? No, the subject will only make her grieve. I put on the floral patterned slippers Rena recommended, while tightly holding the hem of my skirt. If that's the truth, I'd rather not say anything at all. Still, there's no way we can leave here without talking about it. This is for everyone's sake, and of course that includes Rena. I repeated that to myself over and over. Rena escorted us to her room and offered us cookies and juice. The cookies were star-shaped and had a charming homemade feel to them.
そのクッキーどうかなかな
I munched on a cookie. Rena stared straight at me as I did, like she was waiting for my verdict. I would like a cookie too.
ニパーとっても美味しいのです
I sincerely smiled and answered as such. Then, Rena ecstatically raised her hands in the air.
やったー渾身のレナスペシャルなんだよたくさん食べてほしいなちょっと待っててね
Rena sat a plate of cookies down in front of us, then rushed out of the room in a flash. I sensed a faint sweet aroma coming from the other side of the door.
確かにこれはうまいけど
But... Keiichi quietly muttered that. He must be feeling a little anxious, too. No way. Maybe. Swoosh! The door opened again, as expected. And then a towering mountain of cookies came through the doorway. I really want a cookie. No. Rena was standing there with a tray full of cookies.
お待たせ実はまだ他にもいっぱい焼いてたんだよ
If she's baking this much cookies, then she really must be feeling like shit deep down inside.
いっぱい食べてねこっちはチョコレート味でしょこっちはミント味でしょこっちはアーモンド入りなんだよ
Ooh, a mint cookie. I would like that.
あとねこっちはカニさんクッキーなの
Mr. Crab cookie?
ほらカニの形がチョキチョキしていてかわいいでしょ
Oh, it's shaped like a crab. Got it.
こっちはイカさんクッキー
Ooh, a squid cookie.
足がニョロニョロなんだよ
Does the squid taste like a mint? Rena was thrilled to tell us about her special cookies. Seeing Rena like that, there was no way I could tell her about her father. Considering the peaceful atmosphere, what's the best way to handle it? For a while, I nibbled at a cookie and looked down while searching for a good opportunity.
実は俺たちレナに話があるんだ
Keiichi cut through the calm, peaceful atmosphere. Rena immediately looked puzzled by his firm tone.
何かなこ
レナの親父さんの話だ
のお父さんの
Rena's face suddenly clouded over. Naturally, anyone would be anxious after suddenly being told they need to hear something about their father. But this is for everyone's sake, including Rena, in order to make everyone happy. Deep in my heart, I was thankful that Keiichi took the initiative in talking to Rena.
実は俺たちレナのお父さんらしい人の話をシオンから聞いてさ
しーちゃんからなんだろう
Rena's eyes were anxiously shaking. She could probably tell from the look on our faces that it wasn't a very pleasant story. So, right then, I addressed Rena. Alright. Here we go. Time for me to subvert everybody's happiness yet again, like the bastard I am. About your daddy dearest.
いきなりどうしたの どうしてそんなことを聞くのかな。
村でも噂になってるって。その付き合ってる人がクラブで働いている女の人だって。
それがどうしたの？
Rena interrupted in a harsh tone. She had a slightly angry look in her eyes, staring into Keiichi.
どこで働いていようと関係ない。お父さんの好きになった人がどんな職業の人でも別にどうでもいいことだと思う。
Even if she were a lady of the night?
違うかな。
いや違わない。いい人ならな。
それどういう意味かな。
The look in Rena's eyes was starting to appear more and more perilous. That's strange. It's certainly not a fun thing to hear, but Rena's reaction is oddly combative. So I jumped in without thinking. She is a bad, bad woman!
悪い人って言われてもどう悪いのかよくわからないよ。一体何が言いたいのかな。
That she's a bad woman! That's what we're trying to say.
あまり良い噂を聞かないのです。クラブのホステスさんというよりも普段からの素行で。
Rena kept quiet and grabbed herself a cookie. Then, after she finished eating it, she muttered a reply.
リナさん、派手だもんね。でも、レナのうちね、お母さんがいないの。
Yeah. Your bitch mother. Forgot about her. I had heard this story sometime in the past, but I gazed up at Keiichi, wondering how things had played out in this world. He seemed to lightly catch his breath. I guess he didn't know.
レナが前の町に住んでいた時にね、他に好きな男の人を作って離婚しちゃった。勝手だよね。
That it was.
自分は好きな仕事続けて、お父さんはひたすら応援してきたのに。
そうなのか。
女の人ばかりのお店に通ってることは当然知ってるよ。でもお父さんは寂しいんだと思う。いきなり一人ぼっちになっちゃったからね。
Rena smiled and continued defending her father.
寂しいんだからしょうがないと思う。それでそういう店に行くってレナは全然悪いことじゃないと思うよ。実際お父さんはリナさんと知り合ってからとっても元気になってくれたんだから。
ああ、それは悪いことじゃない。けど何？
Rena glared at Keiichi with hostility in her eyes, as he tried to think of what to say. Yes, this is strange. It's like she's refusing to accept what Keiichi's trying to tell her. This reaction is totally unexpected.
お父さんね、結婚するんだって。婚約指輪も渡して受け取ってくれたみたい。リナさんも私に挨拶に来て、気に入ってもらえるよう一生懸命頑張るからって笑って言ってくれたんだよ。
本当か？
嘘言ってどうするの？リナさんもお父さんもレナのために色々と無理して気を使ってくれている。だからレナも少しくらいは我慢しなくちゃって思ってる。それおかしいかな？間違ってるかな？
いや、そんなことはない。
だったらケイイチ君、わざわざそんなことを言いにレナの家にまで来たの？みんな我慢してるのにそれをぶち壊しに来たの？もしかして一人だと不安だからリカちゃんを付き添いに連れて？
Rena scornfully glared at Keiichi. That's wrong. Rena has misunderstood something for a while now. With that thought guiding me, I rushed to speak up. Please, please don't get angry. We're only trying to help.
別に怒
Well,
って
they are.
ない。
I'm not.
変なこと言わないでくれるかな、リカちゃん。
その言い方が怒ってるってことじゃないか。
Rena's eyes were lightly shaking. But after shooting a sharp glance at Keiichi, she turned away looking upset and began messing with her hair in irritation. Why, Rena? Why do you have that look in your eyes? I tried to speak up, but Keiichi held up a hand to stop me. And then he continued.
レナ、そのリナってやつのこと、どこまで知ってるんだ？
言ったよね。関係ないって。だから話すことなんてない。
じゃあ、俺が勝手に話す。いいよな。
話しても聞かないよ。話したければお好きにどうぞ。
Rena unpleasantly turned to look away as she said that. Even so, Keiichi remained calm and slowly began speaking as though Rena was still listening.
シオンから聞いた話だ。レナの親父さん、マミヤリナの働いている店に頻繁に通ってるらしいな。それも、ほぼ毎日。その店って、繁華街の中でも、すげえ高い店らしいな。一回行くだけでも、相当な金額だそうだ。だから常連客は、すぐに顔が知れ渡るって聞いた。
そんな言い方やめて。
聞かないんじゃなかったのか？だから俺が勝手に喋ってるだけだ。
Rena reached for her cup and took a sip of warm tea. And then she silently stared at the bottom of the cup while holding it in both hands.
はっきり言う。レナ、そのマミヤリナってのは、詐欺師だ。男と組んで、結婚詐欺を働いてる。
え？
リナは最近、Hinamizawaにカモを見つけたって言いふらしてるらしい。そして、その時の話で出てきた名字が、竜宮だったそうだ。
証拠は？
これもシオンからの情報だ。リナは物持ちのいい相手を見つけてはいいよって、多額の金品をせしめているってな。その店でも有名になっているそうだ。
大人なんだから、プレゼントだって高いものになるよ。そんなのお父さんの自由じゃないかな。
なら正直に聞くけどさ、普通結婚まで考えてる相手にそこまでお金を使わせるものなのか？それに俺がもしレナとそんな関係になったとしたら。
お断りだね。レナにだって選ぶ権利はあるよ。こんな風におせっかい風吹かせて嫌なこといっぱい言ってくる人のお嫁さんになんか絶対なりたくない。
Rena had a nasty look on her face like she was about to puke. Keiichi let out a sigh after seeing that reaction, and then rephrased his question.
じゃあミオンでもいい。サトコでもリカちゃんでも、もし結婚しようと本気で考えた相手なら、俺は店になんか来させない。相手の気持ちを考えたら、金もそうだけど、他のやつに浮気してるかも、なんて疑われるの、ごめんだからな。
Perfectly normal reaction and way of looking at it, honestly.
普通の会社だって男性女性いっぱいいるよ。そんなことを考えてたら結婚して働くなんてきっとできない。
Well, with Rena's occupation in particular, it kind of, on a fundamental level, encourages that sort of behavior. Unlike, say, a random retail or office job or what have you.
普通の会社じゃないだろ。これは恋愛した気分を楽しむ店の話だ。金を使ってな。
だからお父さんも寂しいんだってさっき言ったじゃない。
もう一度言うぞ、レナ。親父さんは騙されてる。マミやリナに。
そうだ。
Rena violently slammed her cup into the table. The force of the impact was strong enough to make the mountain of cookies spill over.
さっきからおとなしく聞いていれば勝手なことばっかり。
No, you haven't. You've been interjecting.
ケイイチ君はレナのお父さんをおバカさんだとでも思ってるの？
Yeah, he kind of is.
詐欺をするような人かどうかちゃんと分かってじゃなきゃプロポーズなんてできないよ。
You know what they say, love is blind, and, well, those blinders that love can stick over your eyes, they can be damn thick at times, if you let them.
何言ってんだ。
And he's certainly letting them be thick.
騙して結婚するから結婚詐欺だろ。しかもあいつは北条哲平ってやつと関係してるんだ。大体さっきからおかしいのはレナの方だろうが。シオンがわざわざ教えてくれた情報なのに何を頭から疑って聞いてるんだよ。
おかしいのはケイイチ君の方だよ。なんで関係のないレナのうちのことにそこまで口出ししてくるのかな。なんかしーちゃんに頼まれたの？ねえ、
関係ないことあるか。レナは俺たちの仲間だ。仲間が悩んで苦しんでいることを見過ごすなんて俺にはできないんだよ。
仲間？お笑いだね。相手の気持ちも考えずに傷跡に刃物突き立ててグリグリ掘り返すような人なんて仲間じゃないよ。それに誰が悩んでるって？苦しんでるって？ケイイチ君、委員長になってずいぶん偉くなったんだね。顔と雰囲気でわかるとでも言いたいの？
Oh, she's going below the belt now.
でもおあいにくさま。レナは全然悩んでもないし苦しくもないんだよ。だってこれからちゃんと幸せをつかむんだから。
Yep, this is the face of happiness and ecstasy right here, ladies and gentlemen. She's totally not suffering. At all.
嘘だな。
嘘じゃない。
Right. No matter how stubborn Rena can be, this is still odd. Rather than defending her father, Rena is more focused on refuting what Keiichi has to say, like she doesn't want to admit it. That's denial for you. What's more, this information came directly from Shion. That alone should be enough to prove we're acting with good intentions. And yet, here she is, denying the undeniable information right in front of her. Like the good little denier that she is. It's undeniably sad, I tell you. And yet, she's dismissing information from her friends as lies. Isn't this just like when Rena experienced that tragedy?
レナ、C の話が信じられないのですか？
しーちゃんがどういうつもりでリナさんのことをそんな風に悪く言うのか知らない。でも変なことを言ってレナを迷わせないで。私はこの結婚を祝福して信じることに決めたの。
I think you mean to say you've chosen to delude in it rather than believe in it.
これはもう決まったことなんだよ。
決まったことだと？
だってこれはお社様がそうしなさいって言ったんだから。
Then, Rena shouted that in a harsh tone.
お社様だって？
It was an unfamiliar word. Wait, I remember now. That's the name of the guardian god of Hinamizawa, worshipped at the Watanagashi festival. But why did she bring up Orishiro-sama? Clearly you don't know all that, her relationship with Orishiro-sama either.
リカちゃん。
I immediately turned toward Rika-chan with an inquisitive expression, but she seemed just as surprised. She had a dubious expression and her eyes were open wide.
レナも最初はお父さんの結婚には乗り気じゃなかった。でも1週間くらい前の夜、ひたひたペタペタって足音を立てて。
Rena's hands were lightly trembling as she held them against her chest. She looked terrified, so there was no way this was a joke. Sensing how strange it was, I changed my attitude and turned toward Rena.
なんでお社様がレナのところに？
圭一君は知らないんだね。お社様は私たちのことをずっと見てる。そしてHinamizawaから出て行ったり、お社様をちゃんと敬ったりしない人にたたって罰を与えるの。だからレナのうちもお社様を大事にしなかったから罰が当たった。
Rena's shoulders slumped as she incoherently muttered that to herself. Her words were outlandish and bizarre. I couldn't imagine a sane person saying something like that, but I kept quiet and continued listening.
お父さんとお母さんが離婚したのはレナのせいなの。Hinamizawaを出て行くとき、レナは反対した。でも結局お母さんのためだからって言われてついていったら、お父さんが不幸になっちゃった。本当はもっともっとお父さんの幸せを考えて頑張って反対していたら、こんなことにはならなかったはずなのに。
それがこの再婚話と関係あるのか？
終わりなんだよ。やっとお父さんは昔の傷を忘れて新しい幸せを見つけてくれた。なのにレナは最初喜べなかった。賛成できなかった。そのうちだんだんリナさんのことが疎ましくなって、見ているだけで不愉快になってきて、家を乗っ取られるかも。だったらその前になんて考えてたら、またレナのところに来たの。お社様が。
レナ。
The way Rena trembled as she spoke made clear how frightened she was. Rika-chan rushed over to Rena and hugged her for her small body.
お社様はそんな神様じゃないのです。たとえHinamizawaを出て行っても、何も悪いことをしていない人にたたるなんて、そんな神様はおかしいのですよ。
だって今でも夢に時々出てくるんだもの。
Tears came spilling from Rena's eyes as she shouted that. And she was trembling with both arms clinging to her chest, acting like she couldn't even see me as she continued her story.
お社様は言ったの。
Oh dear, the red text. The red text is back!
敵意を捨てなさいって。お父さんの幸せを心から願いなさいって。だからレナはリナさんとの結婚を祝福するの。でなきゃまたたたられちゃう。また変な色のお薬飲まされちゃう。レナの勝手な思い込みで、せっかくお父さんが掴んだ幸せが壊れちゃったら、またお社様がレナのところに来ちゃう。レナが悪い子だっていっぱい責めて、ひたひたひたひたって後ろを追いかけて、ごめんなさいごめんなさいって謝っても、ずっとひたひたペタペタってついてきて。
落ち着くのです、レナ。誰もいないのです。レナも悪いことをしていないから、たたられることはないのです。
早く捨てないと、お社様の力が消えて、私はまた体を何かに乗っ取られてしまう。お社様がついてくるよ。そして早くと私にささやくの。どこまでもついてきて、急げと私をせがす。いつまでもどこまでもついてきて、ずっと言い続けるの。本当だよ、本当だってば。なんでみんなには見えないの？私の言うことなぜ信じないの？みんなで私を騙してるんだ。みんなにも見えているはずなんだ。やめて、もう注射は嫌。
レナ。
Rena's haggard breathing finally began to calm down as Rika-chan and I clung to her.
落ち着いたか、レナ。
レナ、大丈夫なのですか？
Rena faintly, almost imperceptibly, nodded to us. Her whole body was still trembling and covered in sweat. Even so, her look of confusion up until now was completely gone. So Rika-chan and I looked at one another and sighed in relief.
ごめんね。私、取り乱して。
いや、平気だぜ。これくらいさ。
Rika-chan anxiously looked up at her. but she still didn't relax her tight grip on Rena. The sincerity in Rika-chan's expression may have gotten through to her, because Rena's face gradually began turning red.
信じてくれないかもしれないけど、レナは確かにお社様に会ったの。だから、また来た時は怖くて不安で、逃げたい気持ちでわけがわからなくなって。だから。
わかった。
Rena suddenly looked up at me in response to that verbal affirmation. I thought that maybe I had spoken far too plainly. However, I can say for certain that those weren't just fleeting words. They came from the heart. Fear and anxiety, so painful that it makes you want to run away. Even I can understand how hard it is to have the courage to take a step forward.
レナが嘘をつくなんて絶対にありえないしな。それにそこまでレナが怖がるってのは単なる夢とかじゃないと思う。俺はその話信じるよ。お社様がそう言ったのなら仕方がないさ。悪かったな。ひどいこと言ってレナを困らせて本当にすまん。もうこの話はやめにしよう。
圭一くん。圭一。
Rena and Rika-chan both gazed at me with mixed feelings. Shion's information is probably true, but the truth and logic behind it won't necessarily make you happy. And as far as Rena is concerned, Orishiro-sama's existence is an indisputable fact. In a sense, these are the basic elements that constitute Rena's sense of values and idea of justice. If that's the case, rather than denying it and forcing our own values upon her, isn't it our responsibility as her friends to help her find a way to support her well-being, while still abiding that fact as potentially true? I certainly thought so. Sounds like somebody's home. Just then, I heard loud engine sounds coming from outside the house. The sound grew louder as it moved to the front of Rena's house and then ceased, indicating the car had come to a stop. If it's Rena's father and he's coming home to basically sob his heart out after getting scammed by Rena, and then in response to that, Rena goes off the deep end and then, I don't know, decides to recreate the events of Chapter 6 and get the whole damn school blown up in the process to boot. Yeah, let's just see what happens.
Oh, 何かな。ごめん、ちょっと行ってくるね。
Rena wiped the tears from her puffy red eyes, then stood up and left the room. Rika-chan and I silently watched her go.
失礼します。お荷物どちらに運びましょうか。
Oh, it's the delivery guy. Ah, yeah, the one from the tip. That's right. The firm voice of a delivery man echoed all the way up to the second floor. Rika-chan and I looked at one another as we heard it.
圭一。
わかってる。けど、これ以上は本当に押し付けだ。
Rika-chan sighed and slumped her shoulders. Honestly, even I didn't expect us to be so outright rejected, so I was unable to hide my disappointment.
とりあえず、今日のところはここで引き上げよう。これ以上だと、またレナの気分を逆なですることにもなりかねないし。
仕方ないのです。一度出直して、対策を考えましょう。
Them's the breaks. « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « 」 « Should we have stayed a little longer back then? Probably. Considering how Rena was acting, Rika-chan and I decided to leave her a note and head out. But things quickly took a wrong direction from there. Just as quickly as the previous bad ends, I'm sure. Rena was stunned for a while by the pile of new furniture being brought to her room. But she eventually came back to her senses, and then checked on the safe containing the bank book. There, she learned that her father was spending exorbitant amounts of money on Rena Mamiya. Then, after discovering the room information for a rental apartment, she paid a visit to the realtor in Okinomiya. And at last, Rena understood that Rena Mamiya was deceiving her father to extort money out of him. If she wasn't around. If only. Rena devised a plan to kill Rena Mamiya all on her own. And then, while behaving completely normally around us, she succeeded in luring Rena Mamiya to her secret hiding place in the trash heap, and killed her by slicing her head open with a hatchet. As a result, Teppei Hojo was unable to continue living in Okinomiya, so he returned to Hinamizawa and dragged Sadako back to the Hojo household to live with him. Unwilling to let anyone trample on her everyday life, when Rena learned of that, she murdered Teppei as well. Rip. And the unimaginable speed at which it all unfolded made it impossible for Rika-chan and me to stop her. And when we finally learned the truth behind Rena's crimes, we wanted to do what we could to protect her. So, we worked with Mion to cover up the crime. I never believed that was the right thing to do, but we had no other choice. We couldn't just hand Rena over to the police. But even so, Rena's violent tendencies wouldn't stop. She was betrayed by everything she believed in, even God. So, her heart had probably already collapsed. Rena could no longer trust anyone, so she was terrified we might tell the police what we saw. And that fear drove her to kill Mion with her own hands. Keiichi-kun, after you, Rika-chan comes next. Rest easy. That was the last thing I ever heard from Rena. Yeah, these bad endings suck. Alright, let's do it right this time. Do you know a woman named Rena Mamiya the Wise?
うん、知ってるけど、それが？
その女の人ってクラブで働いてるんだろう。つまりその
関係ないよ。
Rena interrupted in a harsh tone. She had a slightly angry look in her eyes, staring into Keiichi.
どこで働いていようと関係ない。お父さんの好きになった人がどんな職業の人でも別にどうでもいいことだと思う。違うかな？
いや、違わない。いい人ならな。
それどういう意味かな？
The look in Rena's eyes was starting to appear more and more perilous. That's strange. It's certainly not a fun thing to hear, but Rena's reaction is oddly combative. So, I jumped in without thinking. Rena, what do you think of the wise Rena?
どうって、それはどういう意味かな？って言葉通りの意味なのです。レナ、正直に答えてください。
Rena kept quiet and grabbed herself a cookie. I still want a cookie. Then, after she finished eating it, she muttered a reply.
あんまり好きじゃない。でも、レナのうちね。お母さんがいないの。
I had heard this story sometime in the past, but I gazed up at Keiichi, wondering how things had played out in this world. He seemed to slightly catch his breath. I guess he didn't know.
レナが前の町に住んでいた時にね、他に好きな男の人を作って離婚しちゃった。勝手だよね。自分は好きな仕事続けて、お父さんはひたすら応援してきたのに。
そうなのか。
女の人ばかりのお店に通ってることは当然知ってるよ。でもお父さんは寂しい、いきなり一人ぼっちになっちゃったからね。
Somewhat skip forward a little bit until I see something new. But I'm the one who told the boy.
リカちゃんが？どうして？
C に話を聞いて不安になったのです。間宮リナという女性のこと。
Rena's eyes were lightly shaking. But she seemed to be rethinking her hostility, and this time it was directed at me. Why, Rena? Why do you have that look in your eyes? I tried to speak up, but Keiichi held a hand to stop me.
レナ、そのリナってやつのこと、どこまで知ってるんだ？
言ったよね。関係ないって。だから話すことなんてない。
じゃあ、俺が勝手に話す。いいよな。
話しても聞かないよ。話したければお好きにどうぞ。
Rena unpleasantly turned to look away as she said that. Even so, Keiichi remained calm and slowly began speaking, as though Rena was still listening.
シオンから聞いた話だ。レナの親父さん、マミやリナの働いている店に頻繁に通ってるらしいな。それもほぼ毎日。その店って繁華街の中でもすげえ高い店らしいな。一回行くだけでも相当な金額だそうだ。だから常連客はすぐに顔が知れ渡るって聞いた。
そんな言い方やめて。
聞かないんじゃなかったのか？だから俺が勝手に喋ってるだけだ。
Wait a minute. Oh, never mind. Rena reached up for her cup and took a sip of warm tea. And then she silently stared at the bottom of the cup while holding it in both hands.
はっきり言う。レナ、そのマミやリナってのは男と組んで
え？ごめん。ちょっと行ってくるね。
失礼します。お荷物どちらに運びましょうか？
The firm voice of a delivery man echoed all the way up to the second floor. Rika-chan and I looked at one another as we heard it.
ケイチ。
分かってる。けど、これ以上は。
Rika-chan sighed and slumped her shoulders. Honestly, you and I didn't expect us to be so outright rejected, so I was unable to hide my disappointment.
しかし、お社様か。本当にいるんだとしたら、余計なことをしてくれたよな。
お社様はそんな神様じゃないのです。
She's a harmless little puppy dog. Bow wow.
人の不幸を願う神様なんて、そんなのはおかしいのですよ。
だよな。でも、あのレナの怯えようは普通じゃなかった。一体何が？
I looked up at the ceiling as I muttered that to myself, and suddenly, a scene emerged in my mind. When I feared the being known as Orishiro-sama, I didn't know what was right, and I didn't trust anything. That time. And when I was in despair, tormented by that sinful mistake, the person who was kind enough to extend a precious hand to me was... no doubt about it.
そうか。
ケイチ、
あ、ごめん。いずれにせよ、今のレナには何を言っても難しいだろう。
He's certainly remembering a lot of things from the other worlds in this particular arc. So they're choosing to play into this particular aspect more than the original chapter 8. Interesting.
だったら、レナを不安にさせない別の方法を考えようぜ。
別の方法とは何ですか？
そうだな。これから考えよう。あいで、リカちゃん、何するんだ？
Uh-oh.
この無責任男。
Suddenly, a sigh escaped me. I'm the fool for expecting too much of him. Does this boy still not understand how serious this situation is? Isn't that only natural? Keiichi doesn't know much about faith in Orishiro-sama, and even less about what personal history made Rena so terrified of Orishiro-sama. Just the fact that he's believed as much as I've told him could perhaps be called a miracle. Anyway, I'm concerned about this story about Orishiro-sama. Indeed, among all of us, Rena is the one most conscious of Orishiro-sama's existence. This is an absolute secret from Keiichi, but she has actually received medical counseling for it. What's more, I heard that she had problems at the school she was transferred to that forced her to transfer again. Leaving the village does significantly increase the risk of worsening Hinamizawa syndrome symptoms. The trigger for that is extreme stress. Doubts, anxiety, and sudden surges of hatred increase one's mental load. Rena was originally from this village, and facing problems stemming from the divorce while moving to a new location ultimately drove her to the limit. And after that set in, she very briefly reached a stage close to L5. It was an extremely dangerous situation. The drugs she had been taking before that were simply incapable of suppressing that level of progression. At one point, she was even given a high-risk prognosis. Nevertheless, Rena was fortunate that after she returned to Hinamizawa, she was selected to receive treatment from a new drug that Irie had just developed, and to receive intensive care in Gogura. As a result, Rena was able to recover to such a degree that she was able to live her daily life as she does now. At the time, I discreetly snuck a glance at part of a report Irie made for Tokyo, and found the name Orishiro-sama written there. It said that Rena interpreted all her abnormal circumstances through a concept she heard when she was young called the Curse of Orishiro-sama, resulting from her lack of familial love. It's normal for a child her age to settle on something or someone to push responsibility onto, but Rena didn't because she really did love her family. And because her high degree of independence caused her to focus her thoughts on blaming herself. That's how the report summarized it. In other words, the Orishiro-sama Rena spoke of was actually her own subconscious. In which case, there's a contradiction there. If the Orishiro-sama that Rena is so insistent on is actually a manifestation of her subconscious, would it stop her from becoming hostile? No. In fact, it would be the opposite. It would drive her to eliminate Rena to protect her family. In other words, it would only heighten her urge to kill. But this time, Oishiro-sama is pushing her to value familial love in an inclusive way, rather than exclusive. In which case, it can be derived from Rena, or from her subconscious, because even Rena's subconscious mind doesn't want to accept Rena. Then, who on earth is this Oishiro-sama that Rena claims visited her again?
ちゃんリカちゃん
I was so surprised to hear a sudden voice that I jumped. When I looked up, Keiichi was anxiously looking down at me.
どうした急に考え込んだりして。
なんでもないのですよ。
Hanyu, are you doing shit behind the scenes? What you up to?
それより、これからどうしますか？
とりあえず、今日のところは、ここで引き上げよう。これ以上だと、またレナの気分を逆なですることにもなりかねないし。
Unfortunately, that's the truth. I let out a sigh full of anxiety and regret as I nodded to him.
仕方ないのです。一度出直して対策を考えましょう。
それにしても、レナのやつ遅いな。どうしたんだろう。
I could hear loud noises coming from downstairs. It seemed like they were carrying some pretty big packages.
ちょっと見に行って。
Keiichi said that, but the door swung open, and Rena emerged the moment he started to stand up.
遅かったな。レナ
After gazing at Rena, Keiichi and I glanced at one another. Rena looked completely haggard just a little while ago, but now she had an unbelievably shocked, gloomy expression, like she was on the verge of tears.
おいおい、どうしたんだよ。
レナ、どうしたのですか？何かあったのですか？
なんかね、家具が。
家具？家具がどうしたんだ？
お父さんが大量に家具を注文してたみたいなの。レナ、全然知らなかった。
Rena's lips were shaking and her eyes were open wide. Sensing that she was in pain, Keiichi put his hands on her shoulders and tried to cheer her up.
レナの親父さん、内緒で模様替えか何かするつもりだったんじゃないのか？ほら、サプライズのつもりでさ。
だけど、全然お父さんの趣味じゃないの。
Deep down, Rena had already made up her mind. Her manner of speaking made that clear.
あんな派手な家具、お父さん選ぶはずない。
リカちゃん。
Keiichi and I looked at one another. Then we followed Rena down the stairs. An endless supply of furniture was being hauled into the house from the delivery truck. They must not have been given layout instructions because the furniture was just being sat down in whatever space was available. Rena's house had previously been uniformly defined by warm-colored furniture, but it was overrun by this new furniture in an instant. Pastel furniture and tropical rugs were laid out. They were all fashionable in style, the likes of which I'd only seen in TV dramas, but they seemed completely out of place in this house. It felt wrong, like a total stranger was moving into this house.
それでは失礼いたします。
After a voice coming in from the entryway declared the work complete, I heard the sound of the engine starting up and the truck gradually driving away. It was like a sudden a storm had struck Rena's house. Rena dropped down to the floor in a daze.
こんなに高そうな家具ばっかり。どうして？
レナ。
Rena immediately rose to her feet like she had just thought of something and rushed to the back room. Keiichi and I quickly chased after her.
あった、これ。
Rena's hands were trembling as she opened the door to her father's study. Is that a strawberry-shaped pillow I see right there? Fascinating little thing. She pulled a heavy portable safe out from underneath a pile of documents, then smoothly lined up the numbers like she knew the combination by heart. And when she opened the safe, she cried out.
何これ?
Underneath some bank books, personal seals, a few stamps, and some unused postcards, there were many bundles of freshly minted 10,000 yen bills. It was a considerably thick bundle of bills, and some narrow paper wrappers seemed to be right beside them. If the wrappers were left behind, then their contents must have already been used up. The stamp on each wrapper indicated that each bundle contained 1,000,000 yen. This was clearly far too much cash to be keeping in a personal safe at home. Everyone here seemed to be thinking that. The pile of cash was weird enough on its own, so of course. Rena's hands were shaking as she opened one of the bank books stored within the portable safe. Rena stared at the bank book. I stretched my body to see what was written there, but I stopped myself. I could imagine that what was there based on Rena's expression alone. Rena remained motionless for half a minute or so, simply gazing at the bank book. And then...
何これ?
She quietly muttered that to herself. Then both her arms fell limp as she slumped to the ground.
Rena.
I squatted down in front of Rena, opened her powerless hand, and squeezed it tight. In response to that, Rena silently offered me the bank book she held in her other hand. I looked inside. There were transactions of hundreds of thousands of yen, withdrawn many times over a very short time frame. No, that wasn't all. A long-term certificate of deposit that was clearly intended for future use was also recently cashed out, and the money was moved to this savings account.
嘘だよ.
Rena despondently muttered that, but her words lacked a strong denial they had earlier.
なあ、レナ。
Keiichi suddenly spread a document out in front of Rena like he had found something, and asked her about it.
お前、引っ越すのか?
Rena was stunned by the document Keiichi held out in his hand. On that document, I saw the logo of an Okinomiya real estate company and room information for a rental apartment. Well, that's interesting. That wasn't in this one. Mention of that wasn't. Yeah, this wasn't mentioned in the bad end route. I could hear the cries of the Higurashi coming from off in the distance. The sunset red sky was dotted with cawing crows. The three of us silently walked forward as our long shadows stretched down the road ahead. I heard the dry sound of bicycle wheels. The sound of our footsteps was too pathetic and too uneasy. I have a feeling this is going to go on for a good while longer, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and end things here, and we can immediately continue right from this spot in the next episode and see what goes. We'll see what happens from here. But yeah, this isn't looking good so far. Not good at all. Hopefully, we can convince Daddy Ryuugu Dearest to stop being a fool in love before it's too late. For all our sakes. Because... on top of that, I'm very, very curious to see if my theory about Hanyu possibly working behind the scenes might actually have some credence to it. Because I mean, what I thought I heard was her laugh in that tip isn't the only instance that we've seen hints that she exists in this world too. You gotta remember that we heard her speak directly to Keiichi prior to him, speaking to Rika about her problems and getting Rika to open up to him. So right now I'm just running with the idea that Hanyu is actually in this world, but for some reason she's just working from a distance. If I'm right, I'm honestly quite curious to know what it is exactly she's trying to do here. Anyway, with all that being said, I hope everybody enjoyed this latest episode of the Higurashi When They Cry console arcs. If you did and you'd like to see more content from me, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I will see you all next time. Take care.